Okay, the light will make any darkness in you disappear. The bubble of the church and the bubble of the world. Big Bang Theory supports Genesis. Science and the Christian faith are not contradictory. Every single place in the world belongs to God.
Welcome back, guys, to another Teen Talk episode. I'm Mina, and we're joined here with Father Daniel, the priest at St. Barbara Coptic Orthodox Church. I also have Rovina, Jomena, and Philo here with us.
Good to be here.
Good. So I think a good first question is, what is secularism?
So secularism is the idea that of separation between God and the world. There is some places that exclude God and religion altogether from them, and God doesn't belong there. We cannot have any signs or any relationship to God whatsoever. There's a beautiful book that was written by Alexander Schmemann. He's an Eastern Orthodox writer. It's called For the Life of the World. And he asks the question, for which world? Secular world or the other world or the religious world? It's for the entire world. There's no such a thing in Christianity as that. Yet, yes, you have to respect other people's views and respect what they believe in and of course, that's a must with love. But the idea as a Christian, every single place in the world belongs to God. The earth and its fullness belong to whom? To the Lord. The earth and its fullness belong to the Lord. Everything is God's. So respecting other doesn't mean internally I still know this is God's place. Do you see the difference? Like in school, yes, I have to respect the rules. But when I'm walking down the hallways in my heart, I'm praising God. This is His dominion. This is His place.
So where do you draw the line between respecting someone and what they believe and still being able to discern that it's right or wrong, and being able to even openly discern that it's right or wrong, what they're believing or saying?
That's a great question. When anything impinges, when anything infringes on my freedom as a Christian, is preventing me from worshiping God or blocking my ability to do it or functioning in that way, this is when that discernment has to be used. For example, if there's no prayer in school, that's fine. I respect that. Right? That's the rule of the state, the rule of the city, the rule of the country. Fine, we'll follow it. We follow rules. But in my heart, before I eat lunch, what prevents me from praying? Nothing. On my way from the car to the school, what prevents me from praying? When I'm walking down the hallway, what prevents me from having my AirPods and listening to a sermon or praying a hymn in my heart? Nothing. So as a Christian, inside of me, I live and that this is also God's dominion. God is here too. They can tell me He's not, but He is. You guys get the message? So that's how to live as a Christian in a secular world.
So, like, for example, in school, how can we deal with, like, classes that kind of, like, go against our beliefs? For example, like the Big Bang Theory and, like, all these other, like, beliefs that we don't believe in. So
that's a good question. So you have to understand that science and the Christian faith are not contradictory. Okay, so they're not at odds. Faith deals with our relationship with God and who God is. Science tries to answer the question of how. For example, if I ask you I want a cup of tea, and you make me a cup of tea, I come to your house, and I sit with you and Dad and Mom, and then you go say, well, I'm going to make you a perfect cup of tea. So you make a cup of tea, and it's the most delicious cup of tea. I enjoyed the cup of tea. Okay, say thank you, Phil. It was a great cup of tea. So this is an experience of the tea. The tea tastes great. I love it. Science doesn't care about any of that. Science doesn't care about you or me or the experience. It cares about how did the dye of the tea join the water molecule and become that new compound that we drink. So it's answering a totally different question. That's why when science is trying to make predictions about God's existence, science stepping out of its own domain. Science is science about what? Data? Do you know the basics of science? What was science based on? The data. You have data, you review it, and you draw conclusions from the data, solid data. So you have a hypothesis, then you study it, you have data, and when you look at the data, you answer the hypothesis right or wrong. What data does science have to answer the question about God or about anything? Nothing. However, like theories like the Big Bang Theory, believe it or not, the Big Bang Theory supports Genesis. Genesis says, in the beginning, beginning point, God created the heaven and the earth. And before that, there was nothing. What does the Bang Theory say? Before the Big Bang, there was absolutely nothing. No time, no space, no material, and everything came into existence at one point. That's Genesis. That's Genesis, guys. So when you look at science, there's no conflict between science and faith. When you look at like the theory of evolution looks at how these organisms came into being. It might make the extrapolation that, there was that, missing link that we don't have, and there was a species between the Homo sapiens and the apes, and okay, it's trying to study something that doesn't understand. But God, in Genesis, he said that he created man in his own image and likeness. So we know that man creation was something that God did. But the book of Genesis doesn't answer the question of how the creation came to be. Yes, it's by God's order and came out of nothing. So we don't really have to have a stand on evolution. We don't have to say anything about it. We don't believe in it. It might apply to some species, like some sea species or some other like different species. But when we talk about the creation of man, we know that that's something unique and special and sacred that God did. And God made us in his own image and likeness. So we can separate. We don't have to follow it. And remember the idea of a theory. Theory means what? It still could be proven wrong. If it's it's a fact, it would be what? It would be a formula. It would be a scientific statement. It would be not a theory. But when you have a theory of evolution, it's still a theory. It could be fallible. It could be fallible. So, and there's other things. We can talk about this for a while. There's other things in evolution that could be studies. There's other things in evolution that okay, we have to answer. Like there's some genetic things that have to be looked at. How does that make any sense? It makes sense by evolution and nothing else. So we have to study. You have to understand it. But that takes us somewhere else. But if you put yourself that the Bible deals with our relationship with God, who our Maker is, and who's a God that died for us, and we love him, and we're going to understand all this later, then you're going to be at peace. But when you try to look at the Bible as a science book, then you're going to get in trouble. Because the Bible was not meant to be a science book. For example, if I ask you a question about history, and you pull your yearbook from the bookcase and you try to look into it to answer the question, you're looking at the wrong book for the wrong answer. You're not going to find it. So you guys have to understand that. Also, when you look at the Bible, science and the Bible, the Genesis narrative about creation, it is the shortest creation narrative, okay, that we have out of all the other religions. So when you look at it and look at the order of things, and look at the order that science puts things right now, it's a perfect match. For example, let me give you just an example. When God created the sea creatures, okay, on day 5, which was the other creature that was created that same day? You guys don't know?
I have no idea.
Birds. Like you say, the creatures that swim in the water and the creatures that fly in the air. And science tells us that those two species came into existence around the same time frame. If somebody's trying to, let's say, cook the books, make up something, why would you put birds and fish? If I'm trying to make it up now in 2024, no way I would say the same day that fish came into being, I would think about birds. I would say probably like, right, fish will come first, they would evolve, and birds will eventually come like million years later. I'm just saying. So there's so many other things that it was not meant to be studied the way we look at it, but when you look just at the basic order that Genesis gives us, it matches the modern science in terms of order of creation, order of things coming into being. So when you look at these things, it gives you reassurance that we have the book of life. Yes, it doesn't answer all these questions because it's not meant to be. But we have to understand that this is a very sacred text that came from God, and it shows us the way to God.
So sometimes these people who believe in these theories, but like really strongly believe, and they ask us these questions, and we say that we don't believe it, and that's fine. But sometimes they push. How do we answer them? Like they ask, well, why do you believe this? Like, what's your proof and stuff like that?
I think the burden of proof doesn't have to be on you. I think you have to ask her, why do you believe in that? So you have to learn how to ask questions. Why do you believe in that? For example, when we talk about the Big Bang Theory, We said as Christian faith, we're not against it. Actually, before that, science used to believe that the universe is probably eternal, didn't have a beginning point. But Big Bang said no, there's a beginning point. That's God's creation right there. How would that beginning point come? But not only that, when you try to read about this and delve into it, there were some laws in place that guided the Big Bang theory. Who put those laws in place? Those laws of physics. How did they come to be? The laws of gravity and the laws of this and that. When you look at the Earth itself, the Earth it's at 23 angle. That if it was 24, 25, would not be able to be here. If the oxygen concentration is more or less, we can't. If nitrogen concentration is different, like how did these small things come into being that way? Like the chance, the probability of that is almost impossible. I remember when I looked at this before, it was 1 over 10 to the 14th. Imagine 1 over 10 and then 14 zeros. It's a zero chance. People forget all that and they focus on evolution and this and Homo sapiens and the missing link. But look at the big picture. How did all these things fit together? So when you look at this, you have reassurance. You have that intelligent designer. God has designed us. He's the greatest designer that designed all this in order and put these things in place. So when they ask you a question, learn how to ask a different question. How's the probability of that being there is almost zero? How this and how that, right? And why do you believe in that? And how come it's still called a theory? How come it's not called a scientific statement, right? So for example, when we talk about atmospheric pressure or gravity, it's not called the theory of gravity, right? We know gravity is a fact. It's a fact. There's no negotiations. So how come the other one's still called a theory? Because still a theory. It could be still proven wrong. So you have to answer those questions. And also growing up, and this happens since we're like in high school, science becomes its own religion. So the idea, like some people come like faithful followers of science. Like I remember when I was in high school, you go to church, you're like, yeah, I'm a Christian, I'm Orthodox. Like, how about you? Oh, I believe in science. I was like, okay, me too. Like, okay, we're not missing anything here. Like, we're on the same page. So you guys have to understand that science and faith are not at odds. We're not at odds. God is the one that made all this. Our faith doesn't answer the how. The science tries to answer the how. Some of those answers are good. Some of those answers are still lacking. So if you understand that, then you're going to be at peace.
Sometimes we get lost in the way and we don't know how to keep like our traditions or like our Christian values. So how can we maintain that?
So speaking of Christian values, I think if you guys know that Christian values come from whom? Come from man or come from God? God. If you know that the giver of those values is God, the Lord of Lords and the King of Kings, if you know that deep in your heart, those values are going to have so much weight, so much significance. But if we think that our values, Mama told me that, Papa told me that, now we're in 2024, maybe, they would have probably thinking differently if they were born around our time. You're relativizing the absolute values. And absolute values means there's no relativity. There's no relativism. You cannot really give a value to them because their value is absolute. It's from God. So when we talk about morality, we talk about right and wrong, when we talk about murder of any kind, when we talk about any signs of immorality or anything that goes against Christianity, when we talk about deviation from God's law and God's order, okay, are these values coming from man or from God? Okay, so we have to understand that me as a Christian have to hold those values deep in my heart. I respect everybody around me. I love them. I wish them all the best. But that doesn't affect how I feel and how I'm convinced in my heart that the source of those values is God. And those values should not fluctuate by my locale. Meaning what? So when I'm here in a church environment, those values are, we're for that, morality, and we have to be pure and we have to be good. But Monday morning in the cafeteria, when we're hanging with whoever, then things become relative. Yeah, that was cool. I like that. Wow, I'm proud of you. Like, conversation changes. You're proud of the very same things that you renounced on Sunday. So this is not living the life that God wants. It's not holding your Christian values in a secular world. That means that you have two worlds. Just like Satan deemed it, the world where God is, and the secular world that excludes God. So if you live your life like this is called the life of two bubbles. The bubble of the church and the bubble of the world. Okay? And if you have lived like that for a period of time, it's okay because we're growing. But at some point, those two bubbles have to collide and become one big bubble. That's your life. It cannot have a secular section and a Christian section. It has to be the one life. So when we say Christ died for the life of the world, which life of the world did he die for? The secular life or the religious life or the personal life or the social life or the religious life or whichever life that crosses you, work life, school life? Which life did Christ die for?
All of them?
All of it. Christ died for the life of the world. All of the life of the world. All of it in every aspect. Christ died for us as an entire being. So we cannot separate our life into those sections. God doesn't want that. There's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful statement, words in the anaphora of the liturgy of Saint Cyril. After we say meet and right, meet and right, meet and right, truly indeed it is meet and right. It says that we praise you, hymn you, worship you, glorify you, okay, and confess to you night and day, okay, at all times, in all places of your dominion. And every time I read this, I was like, in all places of your dominion. So we're supposed to praise you, worship you, glorify you, confess to you, give thanks to you, in every place of your dominion. I was like, which place is that? It's everywhere. Home, street, the market, the school, the playground, the football field, the soccer field. It's all God's dominion. We cannot limit God from anywhere. There's nowhere where God is not welcomed. It's all His. Remember, the earth and its fullness belong to the Lord. The earth and its fullness, its entirety, are God's. So if we live our life that way, we're going to be able to see God in everything that we do. But if we adopt the secularist mindset that I have to leave God out of my school, I have to leave God out of this life, I have to leave God out of my social life, I have to leave God out, then you're going to lose out. You're not going to be living as a Christian.
As Christians, I feel like sometimes there's a lot of doubt within our own beliefs. So where can we, as Christians, learn more and I guess solidify kind of our beliefs within our church and our values and stuff?
Okay, so if there's doubts about your own beliefs, you have to bring them to light. You have to ask the questions. You have to have the discussion. You can even ask Abuna or the servants to sit together and want to have some discussions about this. I'm wondering about this. I'm not sure about that. If you bring questions to light, okay, the light will make any darkness in you disappear. But if you keep your questions unanswered, over time, it's going to keep estranging you away from God. It's going to keep you estranged from the church. You might say the right things, but deep inside, when you and yourself are alone, you're not going to be feeling the right things. So our Christian values have to be internal, not external. Meaning what? If nobody's watching, there's nobody around, I'm in the middle of nowhere, there's never going to be any consequences in this life for this from humans. Deep inside of me, I'm sticking to those values because that's what God has taught me. Do you see? That's internal values. External values with doubts are, I'm going to keep them as long as it serves my purpose well. Like I'm being looked favorably at for it. People like me for it. I look good in the church. I'm a good Christian boy. But as soon as I have the opportunity, when nobody's watching, I'm not going to hold them because I wasn't faithful to them. Do you guys understand? So the most important thing, you have to hold those values internally. These are my values, nobody else's. Nobody's forcing them on me. I love them, and that's how to live my life, and I have to live it that way. So these are called internal values. So that's what we're asked to do, that our values are internal. They're not just forced by the people outside.
How do we show those values to people in especially secular places, really outside the church, like in school or places like that?
Believe it or not, it's easier than you think. Believe it or not, it's easier than you think. I remember So many stories I can tell you. I mean, if you just see yourself as a Christian person and you're not scared, you're not intimidated, and at the same time, you're not impinging or infringing on anybody else around you, you're just being yourself, Christ shines. Christ shines. Yeah, and I remember one time there was like something bad I was dealing with when I was still younger as a doctor. And suddenly, without realizing, I said, Lord, have mercy, because how bad the situation was. And the person is standing who lived his whole life at dysfunction secular. He paused for a second. I thought he was about to mock. I was ready for it and shrug it. But he said, you're right. Lord, have mercy. Do you see how I didn't impinge on anybody? It came natural. I didn't mean to. But because I'm true to what this is real for me, it forced the other person to fear the reality of Christ. Okay? There was another time, I remember, this bothered me. They had, the screensavers they used to have on some of the computers. They had Christ operating, and they were making fun of the situation. Okay? Like, I'm not going to go into it. And I said, this really bothers me. This is not okay. Okay? Even though 25 people were seeing that and they're cool with it. Everybody's blind. But what did that do to people? It forced them to remove it. Even though I didn't fight. I didn't say anything. I just said, this bothers me. This is not okay. Right? Simply. But if we're scared and ashamed and shy, how could that be a Christian faith? How could that be the example of Christ? It can't. So what I'm saying is, if you live your Christian faith, you're actually living it. You're not pretending. It's a life that you live. It forces everybody around you to see it. It shines. There's no way you can keep Christ captive. Christ shines everywhere he goes. So if Christ in you is shining, by your actions, your words, the way you carry yourself out, it forces people to see the reality of that. When those same people see the kindness and the love that you offer them and the forgiveness that you offer them, they're forced to see Christ. So it's no longer at the level of ideas and theories. It's more like real. And most people that saw Christ, they saw him through experience, not through ideas. You know that, right? So we can talk about ideas all day. But when they see you joyous and loving and forgiving and doing the right things and don't say things that people say and don't act, it forces people to see Christ in you. Christ shines. Christ shines. So that's how those people get convinced. At the same time, there's some idle conversations. If somebody is a science follower, follows the science religion, and he's refusing anything you say, and he's being just smart aleck, then really don't waste your time. You can make your points, you can be loving, can be caring, but just walk away. Don't waste your time. Don't waste your time. Because if the person is just trying to be argumentative, there's nothing you'll say or do that will change that. But if the person is actually seeking, then you can have a real conversation.
So how can we handle the pressure of being like that oddball out in our friend group, the oddball out in school, in society? Like just sticking out, it's not comfortable, and it's hard to get through life.
That's a good question. There's a difference between an oddball and being that Christian guy, is the holy man of God, and the person who lives his life normally as a Christian. If you do what I'm saying, I was just saying to Rovina's question, you're never going to be seen as an oddball. Those scenarios I told you about, Lord have mercy, or that bothered me, none of this was seen as an oddball. None of this. It was seen with respect. Do you get what I'm saying? Because you're normal otherwise. You're loving, you're caring, you're doing your job, you're doing all the right things. You care about these people. You're not trying to act like you're holier than them. Do you get the point? The problem is some of us get carried away. They'll become preachy. We don't want to do that. Let your normal life be the light of Christ. Let your normal life be the light of Christ. So being an oddball is not something that we should try to be. But internally holding those Christian values and being normal. In the way we live, we're just holding our values in and following them. This forces people to see those values and value them.
How can we talk about God with friends who don't believe?
So the first thing is, you have to understand that people get drawn to God through us. So if somebody doesn't believe and they're going through something and say, I'm going to pray for you, or I went to church and prayed for you, you didn't really talk about God, did you? But you did. right?
Yeah.
So I think these are the avenues and the approaches through experience that you prove to people the caring of God and the caring of his people when you're caring and loving. But again, if you try to talk to a person at the level of ideas and proving that the Bible is correct and all this is good, but that doesn't normally bring anybody to Christ. I think experience, loving experience, seeing that love of Christ and seeing that real example of Christ is what draws people to Christ. Because that's people. I mean, why do we love Christ? We've never met him, right? We've never seen him in person, but we love him. We adore him. Why? Because give him, right? His life, his words, his acts. It draws all of us to him. How come everybody else is different? They're not. They can also get drawn to him, but once they see that. The problem is they're not seeing that. There is a block that's keeping them from seeing who Christ is. But once they see Christ the way we see him, they love him too. Because there's nobody who couldn't love Christ. So do you understand? So you do it through experience, introducing, I'll pray for you, I'm praying for you, I pray for you in church this Sunday, I'll pray for you next Sunday. You're introducing Christ indirectly, but you're still introducing him. Okay?
Thank you, Abuna, for this great talk about our Christian beliefs in the secular world. Please follow us on all social media with the name Teen Talk, and we'll see you in the next episode.